From the abandoned ruins of former manor homes where it's rumored the spirits of past owners still roam, to prestigious abodes-turned-museums where ghosts tied to various artifacts still wander after dark. Are you ready for our second list of picks for some of the most haunted mansions in the United States? Number 5. The Phelps Mansion Museum. The Phelps Mansion Museum, located off Court Street in Binghamton, New York, is a 3-story brick and stone abode, recognized as the last remaining residence on what was once dubbed Mansion Row. Historically, in 1868 and 69, successful businessman, banker, Republican elector for Abraham Lincoln, and mayor of Binghamton, Sherman David Phelps, would purchase 3 adjoining properties right along Court Street, would tear down existing housing, and would begin construction on an expansive manor home. In 1889, this home was sold to shoe manufacturer George Henry Lester, and later was auctioned to John Stuart Wells, the abode's original contractor, who would rent the palace out to one James Christopher Truman and family. In 1905, the mansion was purchased by the women's civic organization the Monday Afternoon Club, who would construct a large ballroom towards the back of the structure. In 1986, ownership was transferred to the Phelps Mansion Foundation, and in 2005, the whole of the property was charted as a museum by the New York State Board of Regents. The Phelps Mansion Museum remains open into the present, offering tours while accommodating weekly meetings of the Monday Afternoon Club, alongside, as legend has it, a slew of supernatural infestations. The Phelps family moved into the home in 1871. By 1882, every last family member living on site had passed on, and today, experts in the field of paranormal investigation have theorized the grounds are roamed by the spirits of those family members who so loved the property in life, with both staff and visitors reporting objects that move on their own, doors that open and close by themselves, and disembodied footsteps heard from vacant rooms. An old clock held within continues to chime through most days, despite the fact that it hasn't been wound in years, and several have told of encounters with apparitions in old-fashioned clothing, usually spotted watching tour groups from a distance. Number 4. Goddard Mansion. Goddard Mansion, located on the grounds of Fort William City Park in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, is a historical landmark recognized as one of the first grand homes constructed across the whole of the Cape Elizabeth shoreline. Historically, the mansion was constructed from 1853 to 1859 for one Colonel John Goddard, and was subsequently purchased by Judge Joseph W. Simond in 1898. The property was acquired by the federal government during the expansion of Fort Williams in the year 1900, after which it was transformed into a quarters for non-commissioned officers and their families. In 1964, when the town purchased the fort, the old mansion was in a state of disrepair and was left to further decay, and from 1979 and onward, the establishment of Fort Williams Park would begin drawing crowds to the dilapidated ruins. By 1981, and after serious debate, it was decided the interior of the old abode would be burned out to reduce future fire and safety hazards. Goddard Mansion remained open to the public until 2009, when, amidst growing safety concerns, fencing was installed. Though several projects have proposed the restructuralization, restoration, and eventual reuse of the aged manor, to date, nothing has been set in stone, leaving the shell of the once prestigious homestead standing, visible, but not accessible to visitors. From those lucky enough to have toured the interior of the old mansion, as well as from those simply passing by its now walled-off enclosure, a number of stories of otherworldly phenomena have arisen, with accounts describing abnormal hot and cold spots, the constant feeling of being watched, abnormal battery death rates, EVPs captured in recordings and video, and the sensation of being touched by invisible hands. Near the site, a range of full-bodied apparitions in old-fashioned clothing or military uniforms have been encountered, and shadowy figures have been spied stalking parkgoers and passers-by. Lastly, disembodied voices, footsteps, and the sounds of children playing and laughing have been heard from the cold, dark manor, and at night, a number of accounts tell of a phantom light spotted drifting past its windows. Number 3. The Mori Mansion. The Mori Mansion, located off Terracina Boulevard in Redlands, California, is a notable Victorian abode recognized for its hosting of the first bed and breakfast in the city. Historically, the home was first constructed in 1890 by local residents David and Sarah Mori, and in 1906, the Moris would sell their property to W.R. Cheney, who would hang on to the land until 1936. Through the 1940s, it's rumored the mansion was owned by actress Carole Lombard's uncle, who even so much as left it to her in his will. But tragically, the young starlet would pass on before she could ever claim ownership, and shortly after, its grounds would be purchased by Willard L. and Florence Wiseman, before being sold to Curtis and Phyllis Allen in 1969, after which the couple would retain ownership into the 1970s. The old abode was opened up to the public in 1985 as a bed and breakfast under owners Carl Lindquist and Gary Conway, and in 1998 it was purchased by Janet Cosgrove, who set to work on a series of renovations before, in 2006, reopening it as a more modernized lodging. Mori Mansion would spend time as a private residence before falling into foreclosure in 2014, after which it would be returned to Cosgrove, who would sell the property to her nephew the same year. The old residence remains under private ownership into the present. Tragically, Sarah Mori would pass on in 1901, and David, distraught with grief, would refuse to move back into their old home, would resort to alcoholism, and would end up shooting himself later the same year, events which many claim resulted in the abode's fair share of restless spirits. And across the premises, those lucky enough to have worked or stayed at the bed and breakfast before its private ownership reported doors opening and closing on their own, objects sighted moving by themselves, orbs in the backgrounds of photography, extreme hotspots, and a loud banging and rattling heard through most nights. The ghost of Sarah Mori has been spied in the Blue Room, being the location of her death, and the phantom of David has been sighted wandering about, many claim watching over his beloved former home. Additionally, and not suspected to be tied to the Moris, are a host of ghostly children that have been spied playing and laughing through the mansion's many rooms. Number 2. Tickle Mansion. Tickle Mansion, located off Mansion Street in Princess Anne, Maryland, is a historical manor home turned museum that's widely recognized for its neoclassical architecture, alongside a host of distinctive features and 19th century period rooms. Historically, the residence was first constructed between 1802 and 1819 as Tickletonia for Littleton Dennis Tickle and his wife Elizabeth Upshur Tickle. Littleton, a successful merchant, would preside over the early Bank of Somerset and would even act as a representative to the Maryland House of Delegates between 1824 and 1836. Sadly, however, through the mid-1820s, his personal fortune would sour, and in 1828 he would be forced to sell his beloved estate, after which the property spent some time completely abandoned and was eventually used as a boarding house, and later as apartment space. In 1971, the home was added to the National Register of Historic Places, and eventually it was purchased by the Somerset County Historical Society, who in 1996 would amass funds necessary for a full restoration, after which it would be opened up to the public. Tickle Mansion remains in the hands of the Society to this day and offers tours alongside ample space for both private and public events. The most popular legend surrounding mansion grounds tells that when Littleton lost his fortune and home, Elizabeth was devastated and went on to live with her daughter, dying just 4 years later. Around the time the structure was separated into apartments, tenants began reporting encounters with the ghostly form of a woman bearing a likeness to Elizabeth, clad in a white dress, and usually spied gazing from various windows. This phenomenon became so frequent that it actually resulted in several tenants vacating the premises out of sheer terror. Into the present, those who have braved Tickle have described hot and cold spots, orbs in the backgrounds of photography, inexplicable electrical malfunctions, disembodied voices and footsteps, and shadowy figures that lurk about. Several neighbors have documented sightings of a phantom candle light that flits about the second floor after dark, and police have responded to numerous calls and sounded alarms, only to arrive to find the property completely vacant, with no signs that anything was amiss. Number 1. The Samuel Cupples House. The Samuel Cupples house, located off West Pine Boulevard in St. Louis, Missouri, is a historic mansion now operated as a museum that shares its grounds with the campus of St. Louis University, and that was honored with a spot on the National Register of Historic Places in 1976. Historically, the abode was initially constructed for one Samuel Cupples, with work on the house and stables beginning in 1888 and concluding by 1890, and in 1904 a conservatory was added in. Cupples would pass on in 1912 and would will that his house not be sold for at least 8 years following his death, and that when it was sold that it didn't end up in St. Louis University hands. The property would remain with the Cupples family until 1919, when it was sold to the American Railroad Telegraphers Union. In 1946, despite Samuel's dying wishes, the property was finally sold to St. Louis University and was transformed into a student center, complete with office space for academic advising and a bowling alley and bar in its basement. And in 1973, restoration efforts headed by Maurice McNamee Society of Jesus would revert the structure to its earliest appearance, after which the old home was converted into a museum. In the present, the house accommodates the Eleanor Tertian glass collection, which showcases Art Nouveau and Art Deco glassware as a main exhibit, while its basement hosts the McNamee Gallery, which is filled with work from SLU's students, faculty, and visiting artists. Not surprisingly, the Samuel Cupples house is rumored to be haunted by the man himself, Samuel Cupples, and throughout it, students, faculty, former staff, visitors, and other parties have reported doors that open and close on their own, lights that flicker inexplicably, disembodied footsteps and voices from vacant spaces, the constant feeling of being watched, and encounters with shadowy figures that stalk the living. In life, Cupples' grudge with the university began following the construction of DeBorg Hall, which he wrote blocked his view of downtown, and many speculate his spirit remains at unrest due to the fact his beloved abode was sold to the one entity he dreaded it be sold to. His manifestation has been sighted around the property, and has made a habit of causing newer students to feel suddenly unwelcomed, to the point where a number have actually needed to leave. Taking its fascinating and somewhat ironic history into account, alongside its myriad of associated ghost stories and persistent local legends, we felt the Samuel Cupples house was the perfect choice as this list's most haunted mansion in the United States. Thanks for joining us on our second list of some of the most chilling haunted mansions in the US. If you enjoyed hearing our histories and ghost stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn notifications on. Throw us a like and, most importantly, share us with anyone you feel could use a good scare. Good night.